Hi there, this is Nicole from Mama Elephant, and today I'm sharing this Rainbow Strips Big Scripty Hello card with you featuring new stamps and dies from the April 2019 release. I'm going to pair this with some previously released products as well. I'm always a big fan of mixing and matching what we already have with new stuff. We're going to start with a die cut background using a Cloud 9 Creative Cuts die. This is going to die cut the background panel to A2 sized, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. We're going to ink this up with broken china and tumbled glass Distress Oxide inks before spritzing with water from a Distress sprayer and blotting dry. Distress Oxides and Distress inks both react and work with water. I really wanted the oxidized type of look in my background, so I'm choosing to use the oxides today. I'm blending the broken china and tumbled glass with a foam ink blending tool, and I'm using this scrap piece of paper to keep my fingers out of the ink. I find when inking with Distress Oxide inks especially that you can often get finger marks into the ink if you are holding on to your panel in a place you've already added the ink. I don't want those finger marks, so I usually just use a scrap piece of paper to hold it down while I'm adding the ink to the piece that I'm wanting to add the color to. The Distress sprayer is going to add some nice big splatters of water. I've spritzed it, and as you're watching on the screen, you can see some of those areas start to oxidize. I like to speed that up and just blot it dry with a dry paper towel and then set aside that panel to completely air dry. I'm now going to take several colors of cardstock in rainbow color, some bright pink, orange, bright yellow, a limey green, a teal blue, and a purple, and I'm going to cut just all kinds of strips using my paper trimmer. No rhyme or reason, different widths. And then I've got a regular piece of printer paper. I used printer paper because it's nice and thin. What I'm going to do is completely cover that printer paper with a strong adhesive, and then at a diagonal, I'm going to apply these colorful strips of cardstock in rainbow order for a repeating pattern. I'm a big fan of doing this on the diagonal because it really kind of helps disguise any mistakes there might be, but you could definitely do it side to side or up and down, whatever your preference is. I'm going to keep repeating this throughout the entire strip. Partway through, I will take some scissors and trim off those extra ends because I can use those as I'm covering this strip. I did trim my strip only big enough, the background piece anyway, not the strip, the background, so that it would fit the big Scripty Hello part of the April release. That way I don't have a ton of excess and leftover. I'm not going to worry too much about those bottom corners or the upper corner, I guess, I have the paper turned now, and the lower corner. Just get the majority of this covered, and then you'll see I'll take the die and lay it out, and that's going to give me a really good idea of the space. But I want to make sure it's covered first. You probably wouldn't have to trim up the edges if you don't want to, but I always like to. I like to start with a clean panel or clean slate. So I'm just going to gather up all my scraps, and then we will take that big Scripty Hello, and it fits perfectly in this. And once I've die cut it, it's going to have a fantastic stripe effect. Now remember, we put cardstock on a thin piece of printer paper, so it is going to die cut really easily. I didn't adhere all these strips to another piece of thick cardstock because I wanted it to be able to die cut crisply and cleanly. And we're just going to pop that out. Now it is going to be kind of flimsy, I guess, for lack of a better term. which is totally fine because again, my whole goal was to get this to die cut nicely. I'm going to die cut the hello from white cardstock now 2 more times, and we are going to mount those one on top of another, finishing with this rainbow design, and that's going to give our die cut sentiment a lot more stability. And this is what it's going to look like on that great inked and oxidized background. Let's go ahead and stamp our images from the Big News stamp set, another new product from the April release. I'm using the No Line Coloring ink here, and then I'll use some Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers to add color to these cute little images. I've stamped the bear holding his sign and then the group of balloons. There's also an elephant and a bunny in this stamp set, and I'll be sharing another card with this set later during the release week. Then there's tons of sentiments that you can use to customize these signs the critters are holding. I customized the sign the bear's holding with the sentiment, "You're the berry best," stamped with black VersaFine ink. This is a great ink when you're using a water-based marker, which I'm using here with the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I'm going to do the no line coloring, adding mid-brown and beige for my bear. I'm laying down the mid-brown first, kind of tracing the shape and then blending out with my beige marker. The great thing about this no line coloring ink is that you can still see through it for quite some time before the ink fades out, because it does fade over time, leaving you with a complete no line coloring look, which I love. But while you're working on the project, you can still see the eyes and the nose. I've colored over them with my markers, but once I've die cut the image, I am going to go back in with a black glaze pen and add that detail back in. I like to wait until I've die cut the image because sometimes your die cutting machine will kind of smash that glaze pen in or out and it ruins the face. So I like to wait until I've die cut the image to go in and add that detail. I did take a black fine tip pen and add little dots to the corners of the sign after I colored it in. I used some bright yellow and yellow for the sign, peach pink and sugared almond pink for one of the balloons, and then light green and yellow green for the other balloon. I used that same fine tip black pen to draw in the detail of the balloon strings. I've die cut my images now, and I'm going to take that black glaze pen, and I like to kind of scribble off on a piece of scrap paper just to make sure my pen's going to work well and not ruin the face. And then I'm going to add the eyes and the nose back into that sweet little bear. I've die cut those additional 2 big Scripty hellos that I'm going to use the Lawn Fawn glue tube to just trace a nice line of liquid glue on and pop them one on top of another. I absolutely love the Lawn Fawn glue tube, and I use it all the time for die cuts. We're going to finish with our rainbow stripe big Scripty hello. This big Scripty hello is definitely the prominent feature of this card, and then accented by our adorable Big News bear holding the balloons and the sign. After I had these new elements added to our background, I really felt like I needed some additional sentiments or something to fill in the white space on the card. And so we're going to be adding additional stamped sentiments and little cardstock strips here in a second. I've laid out my stamps on the design, kind of gauging how much room I needed to leave for those additional sentiments. Let's glue our dimensional big Scripty hello down in place. And then we're going to adhere the bear and the balloons with foam adhesive so that they lay nicely against our dimensional hello. Because remember, that's 3 layers of cardstock there. And so if we try to adhere our images overlapping it just with regular adhesive, it wouldn't lay nicely. So I'm using some foam adhesive so that it lays super nice. The very tip of the pink balloon will stick off the top of the panel. That does help ground the design a little bit. I didn't want much of it sticking off, so I will tuck those a little bit back behind the sign, but just the tip of the balloon will be trimmed off. Next, we're going to take these sentiments from the Birthday Messages greeting stamp set from Mama Elephant, which these were part of the March release. I absolutely love them. We're going to use these with the sentiment strips included in the Sweet Feline Creative Cuts Dies collection. So I don't have to worry about where to stamp my sentiment or stamping it in a super straight line on my cardstock and then trimming it into a straight strip. I'm going to simply stamp that on colorful cardstock with a clear embossing ink, heat emboss with white embossing powder. Make sure and buff off any of that powder that's left on the cardstock with a dry cloth, and then use a sentiment strip to die cut this into a straight line. It gives a really clean, perfect die cut. So I'm lining that up. This is the smaller of the two strips from the Sweet Feline set, and I'll run that through my die cutting machine to get my strip. Just like we did with the Big News Bear and balloons, we're going to adhere our strips with foam adhesive. I love these foam adhesive strips. They work perfect for little sentiment strips like this. We're going to pop the first one down here at the bottom, and then we've got two more that I'm going to stamp on additional colors of cardstock. I use some of the orange and the pink. The purple is actually Hero Hues Amethyst, the pink is Hero Hues Azalea, and the orange is Hero Hues Papaya. We're going to adhere these two strips with foam adhesive as well. I need to make sure that I adhere the pink strip kind of carefully because it's going to slightly overlap the loop in the letter L on the big Scripty hello. So I don't want it foam adhesive under that area. I'm going to go ahead and adhere the orange strip first, and then we will kind of piece the foam adhesive on the back of the pink strip so that there's a little opening for the loop in the L to fit in. My sentiment reads, "Happy birthday, cutie pie," with a little card to say, "You're the very best. Hello, may all your wishes come true." It's a very sentiment-heavy card design, but I think it really works. Those extra sentiment strips fit the design perfectly and add lots of color to this really pretty blue oxidized background. We're then going to finish our card design with a scattering of Nuvo crystal drops. I'm going to use the same colors that I've used for the cardstock in this design. So pinks and oranges, I believe it's carnation pink, ripened pumpkin, dandelion yellow, apple green, Caribbean ocean, and crushed grape. So all of the same colors. I just went through my Nuvo crystal drops and picked drops in the same colors as the rest of the design. These little droplets add a nice little confetti touch, especially to a birthday card like this. Sequins or gemstones would also work. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this fun card featuring new stamps and dies from the Mama Elephant April 2019 release. The supplies I used to create my card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Mama Elephant stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.